What is up, guys? Welcome back to the crew 2. And well, as y'all know, it is Wednesday, which means the new summit is now live here on the game, which also means we are now in August. We're going to be around 40 days away from Motorfest, which is absolutely insane. But for this week, guys, we have the Legacy Summit bringing us the Legacy Tire, which I would say is going to be heavily gold and or like the sidewalls. But in gold, we have the Mercedes-Benz SLS, which if you guys do own this car, though, you will also get some money back for that. So if you are collecting cars, this can definitely be something to go after. But in silver, we have a legendary half set boosted for the touring car category, which is actually a loot digger set, which I would recommend going after because it can be insanely helpful for getting parts and or getting some sets completed for that matter. But moving over to the next summit though is going to be the Street Showdown, bring us the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 6 GSR Flow Edition. It really is insane how long the names of these cars are, but I really do love the way this car does look. It has really nice rims and or a dope looking body kit. I really cannot wait to test that car out. And then in gold we have the Cyan Smoke and or Cyan. And then jumping into the summit, guys, is going to be based on basically all street style events. So we're going to have two street races and or two drift events as well. And we're also going to have a drag race and or a hypercar event, which one thing I did notice though, the drift event's actually going to be a street race, so that is going to be a very interesting event. I cannot wait to see what that actually is. If you guys were wondering though, I'm also running a very good build on my Lamborghini Aventador. That's also mainly going to be set up for racing, which it's a drift car, which you would never expect a lot of these cars to actually race, but some of them really can do decently at it. And I would probably say the Aventador is going to be one of the better options, but moving over to the next summit, guys, the Cities Championship, which is going to bring us a Fame Magnet boosted for the Alpha GP class, and I would probably say it's going to be one of the better parts that you can actually get. Now, one thing I do think about though is I do feel like a lot of players most likely do not use a Fame Magnet set in this game, which could probably come down to using a Nitro Chemist a lot more and or using something like a Loot Digger, but having followers and or pure on there is actually going to make that a pretty decent part set overall. So I would recommend trying that one out, guys. If you do not have a Fame Magnet, this can honestly be a pretty decent set. But then again, though, we also have a glitch that can actually get you $9.99. So there really is no point of actually getting that set. But looking at silver, though, the Chevrolet Camaro SS is also going to be the silver reward. I would most likely say a lot of players already own this car. So if you do, it's probably going to give you a little money back for owning that vehicle. Then in gold, we have the dark blue nitro, which is going to be a blue nitro. And then moving over to an old returning Summit, the Brits, bringing us one of the weirdest cars in the game, the TVR Griffith Peppermint Edition, which is actually a pretty awesome looking car. I do believe it's going to be like a British muscle car for that matter. It's like a 6-speed V8. And the TVR is also going to be a pretty awesome looking car for that matter. Like this thing has a really nice overall design to it. And I would say if a car like this ever came to the US, it would most likely sell out insanely fast. So I would recommend going after this car, especially because you will be able to transfer this thing over to Motorfest later on. So at least it's going to be another collectible for that matter. But in gold, we have the Union Jack tire. I would probably say that would be the tire you would most likely want on this car. And then in silver, we have the other part of that legendary half set boosted for the touring car class. So if you guys are missing some of those loot digger parts, I would recommend going after this one. That way you can actually go after some of the other sets you might be missing. But overall though, guys, each summit so far is definitely looking pretty awesome, especially this drift car. And then moving over to the summit here now, starting off with the first skill. So for this, guys, it is once again going to be an escape. I would recommend using something like a drag car on this. Now, don't get me wrong, you could also use a hypercar, but I really do think a drag car is most likely going to be your best option. And of course, the Corvette Stingray is probably going to be the best one to use. I know that's most likely going to be a shocker, but moving over to the next skill, it's going to be an Aerobatics, and for this, guys, the Zivko Edge once again destroys it. I would honestly recommend trying out this plane. Now, I'm sure the Harmon Rocket 3 is also going to be a great plane overall, but the Zivko Edge really is going to have a great overall flying feeling to it, and it really does feel nice with its stability as well, so I would recommend trying that thing out. And then moving over to this week's slalom, I actually decided to use a monster truck, which I would say is going to be a great option. You guys can also see though, it did score insanely close to like a rally raid vehicle, so you really can basically use anything on these slaloms if you do have a score breaker set, and using something like a monster truck really does make these a lot more entertaining because at least you can score close to like a rally raid vehicle, and it is of course going to mix up the overall gameplay of this as well. But moving over to the first event, guys, is going to be a no restriction hypercar race, and you definitely guessed it, I actually picked the Noble M500, which is by far not going to be the best option for this. So obviously a Bugatti is going to be a lot better than the Noble, and the main reason for this, the Noble 500, guys, hits around 298 miles per hour compared to the lovely Super Sport hitting, 330. So if you are doing this one solo, I would probably say using a car that goes over 300, at least if you are trying to get a higher score, is probably going to be the best choice. But luckily, the Noble 500 is still going to be a great car, even though it's not going to have the best and or like the highest top speed. But moving over to the next event, guys, is going to be a street race. And for this one, I once again picked a very weird car because I was like, you know what? Let's go use some of these oddball vehicles to really see what they can do. The Audi RS2 Avant is obviously going to be that newer wagon, and or like an old wagon being new in the game, but I would probably say this car is going to be pretty dang good. Now, it's obviously not going to be like the best street car, but my goodness, guys, it is going to be an absolute blast to use. It does handle pretty decently. It gets a bit squirrely, but it's still going to be pretty dang fast for the most part. Now, obviously, you can't keep up with like a Lamborghini, but my goodness, this car really is going to be an absolute blast. And I would probably say a lot of these weird street cars are actually pretty dang good. Now, moving over to the next event is going to be a hypercar race. You also get to use the lovely Ferrari Enzo. So for this, guys, it's going to be mainly on the highway and or like an open road. The Ferrari Enzo is also going to be one of those cars that you most likely will never actually see racing on like many events. And the main reason for that is most likely going to come down to like its overall speed. Let's be honest here, guys, with a Nitro Chemist set, even the Ferrari Enzo is not the fastest thing out there. So I would probably say you're most likely not going to see this car that much, but luckily the handling though is actually going to be pretty dang decent for the most part. Now, moving over to the next event is going to be a no restriction rally raid event, and for this, guys, I did actually use the Pontiac GTO the Judge, and you definitely know me by now by not picking like the best overall cars. I would prefer to use some of these oddball vehicles to really see what they can do. Now, don't get me wrong here, guys. Yellowstone is not going to be the funnest race to complete. There's going to be trees legitimately everywhere. Also, watch out for the mooses. My goodness, they are all over the place up here. But I would probably say the biggest thing on this event is watch out for those trees. I could definitely jump back into this event and do slightly better. And I would most likely say a lot of players are most likely going to do this race one time and probably never look back, including myself. But moving over to the next event though is going to be an Alpha GP race, and this is going to be into the deep, so if you guys are using manual, I would recommend going back to automatic. And the main reason for this is probably going to be because of the boosters obviously giving you much more speed when going over them. I was noticing, guys, using manual, you do tend to actually be a bit slower because you do try to shift a lot more often, especially when going over the boosters. So I would definitely recommend trying out automatic. It does make these races a lot more fun and also a lot easier for that matter. But moving over to the last event, you will have to use a monster truck on the downtown Detroit street event. So for this, it's obviously going to be the Abarth 500, which even to this day is going to be a lot of players' favorite monster truck in this game. So it's not really going to be a terrible vehicle to use, but it's obviously not made for this. So I would recommend being careful on like curbs and or the way you do go around corners. But luckily the Abarth is not going to be a bad vehicle. Do keep in mind though, the top speed of that thing's going to be like 165. So It isn't going to be the fastest thing out there, but luckily we don't normally see mixed events like this where you have to use a monster truck in a street race, so I would most likely say we're not going to see a lot of these events show up in the future. I guess we can at least hope not for that matter, but if you guys have any questions at all, definitely let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more insight.